My husband left me with a hospital debt of $187,436.82. Then he moved into our son's house and told me the bill was my problem. The envelope arrived 3 days after Leonard was discharged. I opened it at our kitchen table, expecting a routine insurance statement. Instead, I saw my name printed beneath one sentence. Amount you are responsible for. I read the number twice. Then a third time. My hands went cold. Leonard and I had been married for 38 years. I had spent 11 sleepless nights beside his hospital bed. I brought him clean clothes. Held his hand through every test. Signed every form he pushed toward me because he kept saying the same thing. Don't worry, Patricia. I'll handle the finances. So I called him. He answered from our son Scott's guest room. I could hear a television playing behind him. Leonard, the hospital sent me a bill. I know. His answer came too quickly. They say I owe the entire amount. You signed the papers. You told me they were routine. They were your responsibility to read. I stopped breathing for a moment. Then Scott took the phone. Mom, Dad needs peace while he recovers. Maybe you should sell the house before the hospital sends the account to collections. My husband had abandoned me with the debt. My son was already discussing the sale of my home. And neither of them sounded surprised. I did not yell. I did not beg Leonard to come back. I placed the phone on the table and walked to the filing cabinet where he kept our insurance documents. The supplemental policy was missing. Behind the empty folder, I found a bank statement addressed to a company called Willow Ridge Holdings. I had never heard that name before. But my social security number appeared beneath it. So did a balance of $640,000. Before I tell you what I discovered next, stay with me. Look just below this video for the red subscribe button. Tap it once. When it changes to subscribed, tap the small bell beside it and choose all. That way, YouTube can show you the next part of my story. You can also tap the thumbs up button and write your city in the comments, so I know where you are listening from. Because according to that statement, I had opened the Willow Ridge account myself. And I had never entered that bank in my life. For 38 years, Leonard had used the same sentence whenever money came up. I'll handle the finances. At first, it sounded like love. When we were newly married, I worked full-time at an elementary school outside Columbus, Ohio. Leonard managed our checking account because he said numbers came naturally to him. He paid the mortgage. Filed the taxes. Chose our insurance plans. Whenever I asked to sit down with him, he would smile and touch my shoulder. You already do enough, Patricia. Let me take care of this. So I let him. Year after year, the habit became a rule. My paycheck went into a joint account, but I never saw the monthly statements. Tax documents arrived at Leonard's office. Bank letters were redirected to a private mailbox he said he used for business. I knew the cost of groceries. I knew when the electric bill was due. But I did not know how much we had saved. I did not know where our retirement money was held. And until that hospital bill arrived, I had never understood how dangerous that silence could become. The next morning, I called the hospital billing office. A woman named Denise answered. I gave her the account number and explained that I had never agreed to become solely responsible for Leonard's treatment. Her keyboard clicked for several seconds. Then she said, Mrs. Mercer, the financial responsibility form carries your signature. I signed papers while my husband was being prepared for surgery. I understand. He told me they were routine admission forms. Denise's voice softened. I can send you copies, but based on what I see, the document is legally complete. My stomach tightened. So the hospital expects me to pay $187,000? At this stage, yes. The words were calm. Professional. But they felt like a door closing. I asked about the supplemental insurance policy Leonard had always told me would cover major medical costs. More clicking. Then silence. Mrs. Mercer, that policy was cancelled 7 months ago. I gripped the phone. Cancelled by whom? I'm not authorized to say without a formal records request. Was I notified? Another pause. There is a note attached to the account. What note? Denise lowered her voice. It says all questions about the cancellation were to be directed to your husband. I looked toward the empty chair across from me. 7 months earlier, Leonard had cancelled the coverage. Months before his heart attack. Months before he placed those papers in front of me. And someone at the hospital had been instructed not to discuss it with me. This was no longer a mistake. Someone had planned for me to sign. The day Leonard had his heart attack came back to me in pieces. The ambulance lights against our bedroom wall. His shoes lying beside the stairs. The paramedic asking me questions while I stood there holding Leonard's wallet and trying not to shake. At the hospital, everything moved too fast. A nurse took him through double doors. Another employee handed me a clipboard. Mrs. Mercer, we need these signatures before treatment continues. I tried to read the first page. Leonard reached over from the stretcher and tapped the bottom line. Just sign it, Patricia. You should review the financial section, the employee said carefully. Leonard frowned. My wife is upset. I'll explain everything later. The employee looked at me again. You have the right to take your time. But Leonard squeezed my hand. Please. Don't make this harder. So I signed. 1 page. Then another. Then another. I thought I was giving doctors permission to treat my husband. I never imagined I was accepting a debt larger than the value of our first home. Denise emailed the hospital records that afternoon. I printed every page and spread them across the dining room table. The packet should have contained 14 pages. Mine contained 13. Page 9 was missing. That was the page describing the cancelled supplemental insurance and the person responsible for the remaining balance. I called Denise again. Was page 9 included when I signed? Her answer came slowly. Yes. Then why isn't it in the copy I was given? I can't answer that. Can you send the original? There was a long pause. I'll need approval from our compliance office. Before ending the call, Denise gave me one more detail. The hospital system showed that my supplemental policy had been cancelled electronically 7 months earlier. The request carried my name, my date of birth, and what appeared to be my digital signature. I stared at the date. September 14th. I knew exactly where I had been that day. My sister, Evelyn, had undergone knee replacement surgery in Denver. I had spent 10 days at her home, nearly 1,300 miles from Ohio. I still had the airline receipt, the pharmacy charge from Colorado, and a photograph Evelyn had taken of me in her kitchen that afternoon. Someone had used my identity while I was out of state. Then the front door opened. Scott stepped inside without knocking. He looked at the papers covering my table. His face changed. Mom, he said quietly, Dad told me you were confused. I held up the insurance cancellation. Did he tell you who signed this? Scott did not answer. He looked toward the missing page. And I knew, before he said a word, that my son had seen it before. Scott kept his eyes on page 9. That was answer enough. You've seen this before, I said. He rubbed both hands over his face. Dad showed me a copy after the surgery. And you said nothing? He told me the policy had become too expensive. He said you knew. I was in Denver when it was cancelled. Scott looked toward the window. For a moment, he seemed less like a man protecting his father and more like the little boy who used to hide broken dishes behind the garage. Mom, Dad was scared. So was I. He said the hospital forms were the only way to keep the house protected. Protected from whom? Scott did not answer. I slid the Willow Ridge statement toward him. Have you seen this name? His eyes moved across the page. Too slowly. Dad mentioned a business account. When? After he came to my place. Leonard had not moved in with our son because he needed help recovering. He had moved his laptop, his tax files, and every folder he had removed from our home office before the ambulance arrived. Scott finally sat down. He said you were overwhelmed and might start making bad decisions. What kind of decisions? Selling things. Closing accounts. Accusing him of hiding money. I looked at him. He predicted the accusation before I knew there was anything to accuse him of. Scott's shoulders dropped. He had not planned the deception. But he had accepted his father's version because it was easier than questioning it. Before he left, he asked me to sell the house. Just until the debt is handled, he said. Dad thinks it's the safest option. I waited until his card disappeared. Then I called the bank listed on the Willow Ridge statement. The representative asked for my social security number, my birth date, my mother's maiden name. I answered all three. Then came the final security question. What is the first name of your oldest grandchild? I don't have grandchildren. The line went quiet. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mercer. Your answer does not match our records. The account is using my identity. I still cannot release information. Can you at least tell me where it was opened? Another pause. The contact address is registered to a residence in Dublin, Ohio. Scott lived in Dublin. I asked for the street. The representative refused. But I no longer needed it. The insurance cancellation had been submitted from my son's address. The account used a security answer only someone in that house had invented. And Leonard had moved there before the first bill ever reached me. This had not begun in the hospital. The hospital was only where they expected me to stop asking questions. The next morning, I called the one person Leonard had never liked discussing money around. Carol Bennett. She had been my closest friend for 26 years and had worked as a forensic accountant before retiring. When I told her about Willow Ridge Holdings, she did not interrupt. She only said, "Bring every document you have." An hour later, we covered her kitchen table with bank statements, hospital forms, insurance records, and the page Leonard thought I would never notice. Carol put on her reading glasses. Patricia, this is not a normal family account. What is it? A holding company. She turned her laptop toward me. Willow Ridge Holdings had been formed 3 years earlier. The registered owner was me. My driver's license number appeared in the filing. So did my social security number. But the mailing address belonged to a private mailbox near Scott's neighborhood. Carol clicked through another record. This company owns more than one account. How many? At least 4 that I can see. My mouth went dry. The first account held cash. The second listed municipal bonds. The third appeared connected to a property sale. The fourth had been opened only 6 months earlier. Every account carried my name. Every signature looked close enough to mine to pass a quick review. But not close enough to fool me. Carol studied the paperwork. Who had access to your personal documents? Leonard. Anyone else? Scott sometimes helped him scan tax records. Carol looked at me carefully. She was not accusing my son. She was asking me to stop protecting possibilities from the truth. Then she found something else. A safe deposit box. Joint access. Patricia Mercer and Leonard Mercer. I have never rented a safe deposit box, I said. The bank says you did. When? 3 years ago. Carol requested the public branch record. The account had been opened in person. The file claimed the bank had verified my identification. There was even a note stating that I had personally signed the access card. I stood and walked toward the window. 3 years earlier, Leonard had taken me to a medical appointment that morning. I remembered because he had insisted we stop for lunch afterward. For nearly 2 hours, I had been sitting across from him at a restaurant. If someone opened that box in my name, Leonard knew I could not have been there. Carol reached for her phone. "We need an attorney." Before she dialed, another message appeared in the branch record. "Security footage available upon legal request." I stared at those words. Somewhere inside that bank was a video of the woman who had used my name. And I was finally going to see her face. Carol called an attorney named David Rosen. He arrived that afternoon carrying a leather case and the kind of calm voice that made panic feel less useful. He read every page twice. Then he looked at me. "Patricia, your husband did not simply hide money from you. He tapped the Willow Ridge documents. He hid it behind you." David explained what the papers meant. On paper, I was not a victim standing outside the company. I was the managing member. The legal owner. The person responsible if anything went wrong. Leonard had kept control of the money while placing my name between himself and every possible question. If the hospital demanded payment, the debt pointed to me. If the bank reviewed the accounts, the company pointed to me. If regulators ever looked deeper, my signature appeared everywhere. But Leonard had made one mistake. By putting my name on Willow Ridge, he had also given me the legal right to challenge every transaction. David moved quickly. He sent formal notices to the bank. He requested the safe deposit records. He demanded that all video footage be preserved. Then he asked the bank to freeze the accounts until my identity could be verified. By 5 o'clock, the bank had blocked all withdrawals. Less than 20 minutes later, Leonard called. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. "What did you do?" he asked. His voice no longer sounded weak. "I asked questions. You had no right to interfere with those accounts. They carry my name. You don't understand how they work." There it was again. The same sentence. The same belief. I was useful enough to carry the risk, but never capable enough to understand it. Before I could respond, David placed one finger against his lips. So I stayed quiet. Leonard filled the silence himself. "You could ruin everything Scott and I have been trying to protect." Scott and I. Not just Leonard. My chest tightened, but I did not react. After the call, David received a secure email from the bank. The archived video had been found. We watched it on Carol's laptop. A woman entered the branch wearing a gray coat and dark glasses. She presented my driver's license. Signed my name. Then opened the safe deposit box with Leonard standing beside her. The woman was not a stranger. I had seen her for years at Leonard's office. Her name was Marjorie Cole. His longtime administrative assistant. David paused the video. "She was pretending to be you." I looked at Leonard's hand resting against her back. "No," I said quietly. "She was doing exactly what he hired her to do." The next morning, Scott came to my house carrying a blue folder. He did not use his key. He knocked. That small courtesy told me he already knew something had changed. When I opened the door, he looked exhausted. "Can we talk?" I let him in. David had advised me not to meet with Scott alone, so Carol sat quietly in the living room with a cup of coffee. Scott noticed her. His expression tightened. "This is a family matter." Carol answered calmly. "So is using Patricia's identity." Scott looked away. Then he placed the folder on the coffee table. "Dad asked me to bring these." Inside was a financial power of attorney. There was also an application for a senior living community 20 miles outside Columbus. My name had already been typed into both documents. "You contacted a facility?" I asked. "Dad did." "Before speaking to me?" "He thinks you need support." "I need answers." Scott rubbed his forehead. "Mom, you froze accounts that pay for Dad's care. The bank says there may be an investigation." He's terrified. For the first time, I heard something honest in his voice. Not greed. Fear. Leonard had spent Scott's entire life teaching him that financial control meant safety. Now that control was slipping, and Scott believed the family was falling apart. I opened the power of attorney. It gave Scott authority over my bank accounts, property, and medical decisions. This is not temporary. That's what Dad said it was. Did you read it? Scott went silent. I almost felt sorry for him. He had learned the same lesson I had. Trust Leonard. Sign later. Ask nothing. Then Scott made his mistake. Dad warned me you might become paranoid once you saw the numbers. I looked up. What numbers? His face changed. I had never told him about the balance. Carol set down her coffee. Scott stood too quickly. I should go. Before he reached the door, his phone rang. Leonard's name appeared on the screen. Scott answered. I could hear my husband's voice. Did she sign? Scott looked at me. No. There was a pause. Then Leonard said, the bank freeze expires in 72 hours. We only need her signature before then. Scott slowly lowered the phone. He finally understood. This was not about protecting me. It was about beating the clock. I closed the folder and handed it back. Tell your father I won't sign anything. Scott stared at the papers in his hands. Then he whispered, Mom, what exactly did he put in your name? I looked toward David's business card on the table. That, I said, is what we're about to find out. David found the first direct payment to Scott that afternoon. $30,000. The money had left Willow Ridge 2 days after Leonard came home from the hospital. Scott stared at the transfer record on David's laptop. That was for my mortgage, he said. Dad told me it was an early family gift. David turned the screen toward him. That is not how it was recorded. The payment was listed as a consulting fee. The approved consultant was Scott Mercer. The person who supposedly authorized it was me. I looked at my son. What consulting work did you perform? None. Did you sign anything? Scott's face tightened. Dad sent me a form. He said the bank needed it for tax purposes. Did you read it? He lowered his eyes. No. The answer hurt because I recognized it. Leonard had trained both of us to mistake obedience for trust. David opened another folder. The $30,000 was only one piece. Willow Ridge controlled municipal bonds, 2 investment accounts, and proceeds from a commercial property Leonard had told me was still losing money. The estimated total was almost $2.4 million. Scott leaned back slowly. He told me the company barely had enough cash to cover expenses. He told me the same thing about our retirement, I said. Carol pointed to a series of signatures. If anyone investigated Willow Ridge, Patricia would appear to own it. Scott would appear to receive money from it. Leonard would appear to be advising both of you from the outside. Scott's face went pale. He put us between himself and the accounts. David nodded. That is exactly what he did. For the first time, Scott stopped defending his father. But I did not excuse him. You took the money. I thought it came from Dad. You also asked me to sell my house. He swallowed. I wanted to believe him. That was easier than believing me. Scott did not argue. A few minutes later, he opened his email and searched Leonard's name. Most of the messages were ordinary. Then he found one sent the night before my husband's surgery. The subject line read, Hospital paperwork. Scott opened it. There were only 2 sentences. Make sure your mother signs every page. Once she signs at the hospital, everything else becomes manageable. Scott read the message twice. Then he quietly forwarded it to David. I'll return the $30,000, he said. I looked at him. That is not enough. I know. His voice broke. But it is where I start. The bank freeze had 48 hours left when Leonard made his next move. David called me just after 7 that evening. Patricia, your husband filed for temporary financial authority. I sat down slowly. Over me? Yes. He claims you are confused, emotionally unstable, and unable to manage the accounts. For 38 years, Leonard had told me I did not need to understand money. Now he was using that silence as proof that I could not. David continued. He submitted a power of attorney. I never gave him one. He says you signed it at the hospital. My stomach tightened. Another paper. Another signature. Another risk hidden inside the worst night of my life. Leonard had also asked the bank to release the Willow Ridge Fund so he could pay medical expenses. The request included a transfer order for almost $1.8 million. The destination was an account in Nevada. David spoke carefully. If the court accepts his documents, the bank may have to reopen access. How long do we have? The emergency hearing is tomorrow morning. Scott arrived 20 minutes later. He looked smaller than he had the day before. I gave David every email Dad sent me, he said. And the mortgage money is being returned. I studied my son. That may not protect you. I know. The consulting form has your signature. I know. If we submit it, investigators may ask why you accepted the payment. Scott sat across from me. For the first time, he did not ask me to protect him. Submit it. I felt something shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But honesty had finally entered the room. David placed the hospital power of attorney on my table. The signature looked like mine. The date was correct. Then he pointed to the time. 9:42 in the morning. Do you remember where you were then? I did. Leonard had been taken into surgery at 9:35. At 9:42, I was sitting in the family waiting room with Scott, a nurse, and 3 other relatives. I had not signed anything. David pulled out the hospital visitor log. Then the security record. Then the nurse's written notes. All of them placed me in the waiting room. The document claimed I had signed in a private office on another floor. Scott stared at the page. Dad couldn't have done this alone. No, David said. Someone inside helped him. At 8:15 the next morning, we entered the courthouse. Leonard was already there. So was Marjorie Cole. And when she saw the hospital record in David's hand, she stopped walking. The hearing began at 9 o'clock. Leonard sat across from me in a dark suit. Marjorie sat behind him. Scott chose the chair beside me. That decision said more than any apology could. Leonard's attorney spoke first. He described me as overwhelmed. Confused. Unable to understand complicated financial matters. Then Leonard leaned toward the judge. I was trying to protect my wife. The words almost made me laugh. For 38 years, that was how he had described control. Protection. David stood. We would like to present a timeline. He placed the first document on the screen. The supplemental insurance policy was cancelled 7 months before Mr. Mercer's heart attack. The next document appeared. The request used Mrs. Mercer's identity while she was in Denver, Colorado. Then came the bank footage. Marjorie entered the branch carrying my driver's license. Leonard walked beside her. No one in the room moved. David continued. 3 years later, Mrs. Mercer was pressured to sign hospital forms while her husband was awaiting surgery. A hospital finance employee joined by video. She confirmed that she had warned me to read the financial section. She also confirmed that Leonard repeatedly told her to move the process along. Then David displayed the power of attorney. It claims Mrs. Mercer signed at 9:42 that morning. He placed the hospital visitor log beside it. At 9:42, she was in the surgical waiting room. The nurse's notes confirmed it. The security record confirmed it. Scott confirmed it. Leonard's attorney stopped taking notes. David moved to the Willow Ridge accounts. $2.4 million. 4 accounts. 1 safe deposit box. 1 transfer order for nearly $1.8 million. And one $30,000 payment disguised as consulting work. Leonard finally interrupted. I handled everything because Patricia never wanted responsibility. I looked directly at him. No, Leonard. You made sure I never had information. His face tightened. David placed one final email on the screen. Make sure your mother signs every page. Once she signs at the hospital, everything else becomes manageable. Scott lowered his head. Leonard looked at our son. For the first time, fear replaced confidence. Leave him out of this, Leonard said. He did what I told him. The room went still. It was the first honest sentence my husband had spoken all morning. David turned to the judge. Mr. Mercer placed the debt in his wife's name, the payment in his son's hands, and the money beyond both of their reach. Then he looked at Leonard. There is only one person here whose name never appears as financially responsible for Willow Ridge. Leonard said nothing. He did not need to. The silence had finally become evidence. The judge did not rule immediately. She reviewed the timeline. The bank records. The hospital documents. The video of Marjorie using my identification. Then she looked at Leonard. Mr. Mercer, this court is maintaining the freeze on all Willow Ridge assets. Leonard's face changed. His attorney leaned toward him, but he did not seem to hear a word. The judge continued. An independent fiduciary will oversee the accounts during the investigation. No transfers. No withdrawals. No changes in ownership. For the first time in our marriage, Leonard had no access to the money he had controlled so carefully. David placed one hand over the folder in front of me. The hospital's compliance director spoke next. After reviewing the missing page, the canceled insurance policy, and the pressure placed on me during Leonard's admission, the hospital suspended collection of the entire balance. $187,436.82. Removed from my responsibility. Not reduced. Not delayed. Removed. I closed my eyes for 1 second. That number had sat on my chest for weeks. Now it was gone. The bank representative confirmed that my identity had been used without proper authorization. The safe deposit box would remain sealed. Every account connected to Willow Ridge would be examined. Then David revealed the final piece. A commercial property Leonard had told me was nearly worthless had been sold 18 months earlier. The proceeds had never entered our joint accounts. More than $900,000 had gone directly into Willow Ridge. That money had come from an asset we owned together. Leonard had not built the entire hidden fortune alone. He had hidden part of our marriage from me. He looked across the room. Patricia, I was trying to protect what we had. I answered quietly. No. You were protecting your control over it. Then I repeated the words he had used when I first called about the bill. You were right about one thing, Leonard. My name was on everything. I let the silence settle. That is why you cannot touch any of it now. Scott lowered his eyes. He was not forgiven. But he had told the truth. He had returned the $30,000 and agreed to cooperate fully. As we left the courthouse, Leonard called my name. I turned. He looked older than he had that morning. Leave Scott out of this, he said. He did not know everything. It was not enough. But it was the first time he had chosen to protect someone without controlling them. I walked away with David beside me. The debt was no longer mine. And neither was the silence. The divorce took 11 months. There were no dramatic courtroom speeches. No sudden apologies that erased 38 years. Just documents. Bank reviews. Property records. And one careful decision after another. The independent investigation confirmed that much of the Willow Ridge money had come from assets Leonard and I had built together. The accounts were divided under court supervision. Leonard lost control of the company. But he was not left with nothing. That mattered to me. I wanted justice. I did not want revenge. Scott returned the $30,000 and cooperated with every review. For a long time, our conversations stayed short. He called every Sunday. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I let the phone ring. Trust does not return because someone says the right words. It returns when their actions remain honest long after the crisis is over. 6 months later, Scott came to my house carrying no folder. No papers. No request. He sat across from me and said, "I spent my whole life believing Dad understood everything and you understood nothing." I waited. He looked down. I never asked whether that was true. I did not forgive him that afternoon. But I made coffee. It was a beginning. Leonard sent me one letter after the divorce became final. He did not ask me to come back. He did not blame his health. He wrote only this. I called it protection because control sounded too ugly. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Some truths arrive too late to repair a marriage. But they can still stop the damage from spreading. With part of my settlement, Carol, David, and I created the Maple Fund. We offered free financial workshops for older women. We helped them read insurance forms, review power of attorney documents, request bank records, and ask questions before signing anything. At our first meeting, a 72-year-old widow named Helen sat across from me with a stack of papers. "My son told me not to worry," she said. "He said he would handle the finances." For one moment, I heard Leonard's voice. Then I gently moved the pen away from her hand. "Maybe your son means well," I said. "Maybe he does not. Either way, you deserve to understand every page." We read them together. Beside me was the original hospital bill. $187,436.82. Across the front, in bold letters, were the words, "Balance removed." That bill once made me feel powerless. Now it reminded me to ask one more question. Do you think Scott deserved another chance, or would you have walked away from both him and Leonard for good?